I have this kind of belief that the more that what you do personally or your company does affects the base layer, the more true to the ethos of Bitcoin that company needs to act. So if you're a miner, if you're a node operator, if you're somebody, a Bitcoin core dev, like those kind of people operating, they are people that have to be kind of the high priest. They have to act with the utmost integrity, because when they go off track, they create a lot of damage and they hurt a lot of other innocent people.
Welcome back to the Freedom Footprint Show, the Bitcoin philosophy show with Knut Svanholm and me, Luke the Pseudofin. Today's guest is Bob Burnett, CEO of Barefoot Mining. His life trajectory has taken him from working on the first personal computer to discovering Austrian economics to a burning passion for Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining. In this episode, we take a deep dive into the world of Bitcoin mining. We talk about how pools work, how they operate. We compare block size to block time, and we discuss how the role of miners will change in the future. But we also talk about the ins and outs of operating a company with a 100% Bitcoin ethos and the passion and purpose that Bitcoin can inspire. But before we jump in, a quick reminder that the best way to support the show is to send us a boost or stream us some sats using a value for value podcasting app such as Fountain. If you're listening to the show as a podcast, check it out on Fountain. You can earn sats from listening and you can support us and all your other favorite shows. You can also support us on Geyser Fund or send sats directly to our Lightning address, freedom@geyser.fund. And if you want to exchange your dirty fiat, you can support us on Patreon. All our links are in the description. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to like the episode and subscribe to the channel. Even if you're listening as a podcast, head over to our YouTube channel and subscribe to us there. It would be a big help. And finally, we want to thank today's sponsors: Wasabi Wallet, Orange Pill app, The Bitcoin Way, Zelox, and BitcoinBook.shop. All their information is in the description, and we'll be talking a bit more about them later. And now, without further ado, here is Bob Burnett on the Freedom Footprint Show. Bob, welcome to the Freedom Footprint Show. Thanks for joining us.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, welcome, Bob. We've interacted over the years a couple of times on Twitter, or more than a couple of times, quite often. Not as often nowadays, but a few years back we had some back and forths. I seem to recall. Yeah, I enjoyed those.
Yes, me too. Me too.
Can you tell us about? Well, let's start at the beginning, shall we? So give us the TLDR about yourself and what you do, and then we can get into the orange pill stuff afterwards.
Sure. My primary thrust is through a company called Barefoot Mining. We've been in the mining business since 2017. My background and how I got into that was, my background is in personal computer design. So going way back to the mid 80s, I started out of school working for a company called Zenith, which was in that era one of the larger TV brands in the world, but they had a personal computer division. And this was just after the IBM AT computer had been released. And so I had the good fortune of being assigned to a design team that ended up creating what I believe to be the first laptop computer. So it was kind of a really neat piece of history. I didn't realize, I think a lot of how people are in Bitcoin today, a lot of people are working on things they may not understand and grasp the significance of what they worked on until a decade or two later. And I had that experience and I rode that wave of the personal computer for the next 20 years. Ultimately, I was the chief technical officer for a company called Gateway, which was one of the larger PC companies in the world. We had about $9 billion in revenue and, helped take them public. And, it was a great ride. Ultimately, after leaving there, I did a technology incubator, really trying to help small technology startups get going. And to be honest, I was kind of searching, I think, for that thing, because I was involved in things that were exciting, but having come from, I guess, literally the birth of the personal computer and riding that wave, it was difficult to find something that had the same excitement. Like, it was really hard, So It wasn't until 2017 that I drifted into this space. And, full disclosure, like a lot of people, I came in through the back door and through a shitcoin, but not in the typical way. I wasn't trying to buy shitcoins. What happened was I got a phone call one day from somebody that said, "Hey, Bob, can you design 300 Ethereum mining servers for me?" And this was at a time when people were building, if you remember those days, people were building these, what they called open air rigs. They would take motherboards and graphics cards and strap them to wire racks because they couldn't cool them properly. And it didn't scale well. It didn't work. So I have a long relationship with NVIDIA going back to the early 90s. In fact, my company Gateway in the early 90s was the very first company to design a piece of NVIDIA silicon on a motherboard. So we were their first customer. So when they were trying to get started. And so anyway, I ended up designing these machines for them. And it was a nice order, a big order. And then I said, well, maybe somebody else would want to buy them. But I was thinking like a computer guy, right? I was just a guy trying to sell computers. And people started to say yes. But these people all said, for the most part, yes, but only if you will host it for me too. So that kind of led me into, well, I guess I have to open, at that time it was a data center. Now we do everything in containers, but we had to open a data center up so that we could sell the computer. That was kind of hosting was an enabler to us selling the machine. But different sidelight, I also, in addition to my technical degree, I have a degree in economics, and I had started studying Austrian economics in the early 2000s, 2001, 2002. I certainly have the Austrian bent, libertarian sort of bent, pre-Bitcoin. And I started as a technical guy, though, I started to look at what I was selling, this Ethereum thing. And I started to get uncomfortable with it. I started to see, this was like in 2018, this doesn't feel right. The proof of stake stuff was coming. The governance structures were coming, the monetary policy, all that sort of stuff. So we started to pivot the company because I found Bitcoin and I said, no, this is the right way, right? It made sense technically. It made sense at least at a 50,000 foot level from the economic principles behind it. And so we started to pivot the company that direction. And we're purely a Bitcoin company. Maybe we could talk about it more. In fact, I operate my company completely within the ethos of Bitcoin. And it's our guiding principle of our company. And I think that's something, honestly, that worries me within the community, within the ecosystem, is that I think there are a lot of actors playing major roles that don't act within the ethos. And it concerns me not that Bitcoin is going to fail, but the road is a lot rockier when you have people acting outside of the best interest of Bitcoin.
Yeah, that's unfortunate because it will just slow down the pace of hyper-Bitcoinization, I guess.
Yeah, it slows it down, and it also creates damage too. So as an example, I think I'm going to do some content on this in the future, but I'll preface it with you guys today. This is what happens. Just as an example, Core Scientific, which is, still to this day, I believe the single largest mining company in the world, acted completely with a Wall Street fiat mindset during 2021 and 2022. They went public. They took on $1 billion of debt. They bought massive amounts of inventory that they didn't even know where they were going to put. They couldn't get it deployed. And those acts, in fact, I believe they should be held in the same regard as like a Voyager or BlockFi, or, I think we all kind of detest what those companies did, and we blame them to a great degree for the bear market and the turbulence that the community has faced. But Core has largely gotten a free pass on this for some reason. They haven't been vilified the way that I think they should be vilified. Because what they did was they used their position, a really Cantilian position, right, to their access to money and access to capital. And they used it to essentially buy up all the supply of mining equipment in the late 21 and early 22 time period. And what they did was they made it impossible for the plebs and the small mining companies who wanted to expand to get access to equipment. They put a lot of companies out of business. They restricted the growth of a lot of well-meaning companies. And in the meantime, they were using this access to capital, acting essentially as a zombie company. And you know, as you said, Knut, in the end, Bitcoin will find its way. It will correct itself. But a lot of really well-meaning, well-intended people and companies suffered massive collateral damage as a result of it. And that really bothers me. That frankly, more than bothers me, it angers me. It really, really irks me. And there's a lot of behaviors like that. And you know, I have this kind of belief that the more that what you do personally or your company does affects the base layer, the more true to the ethos of Bitcoin that company needs to. So if you're a miner, if you're a node operator, if you're somebody, you know, a Bitcoin core dev, like those kind of people operating there, they are people that have to be kind of the high priests. They have to act with the utmost integrity, because when they go off track, they create a lot of damage and they hurt a lot of other innocent people. So anyway, that's a bit of my tirade.
It reminds me of a lot of stuff. There's a lot to unpack here, and I can start by on a positive note by saying that both me and Luke were in Prague and Riga recently. Prague in June and Riga now just a couple of weeks ago. And the happy news we have from there is that the signal to noise ratio is getting way, way better. And if you compare it to the Miami conference, like these, both Prague and Riga score very much higher in signal to noise ratio. I remember in Miami, I was in the Orange Pill app booth, and in the aisle next to us, there's this company with a big backdrop that says "identity on the blockchain," which is like the opposite of the Bitcoin ethos. Like it's all the bad since
oxymoron, isn't it?
Yeah. So it's called identity with as in I or something, and everything was wrong with it. So you should put your passport on the blockchain or some bullshit like that. But what we felt, and from what I've heard about BitBlock Boom and other like hardcore Bitcoin conferences, they're becoming better. I mean, it's a slow process. I mean, back in 2019 in Riga, the big shitcoin thing that happened there, where people didn't call out the bad actor, was when Andreas Antonopoulos had just started writing his Ethereum book.
Yeah,
and everyone was afraid of calling him out because he was sort of untouchable, since everyone was orange pilled by him at some point. And you remember in 2017, Andreas was the only guy. Like there were no sailors.
He was very important to me. Yes.
For some reason, he was untouchable, and he still is to this day to some extent. I mean, then again, this community is better than any other community on Earth at slaying their heroes. Like most of the heroes from 10 years back have been slain, all of them. If you look at one of those early Bitcoin movies, they all sold out, and they all depressingly enough, it's just shown you a lot of like how many bad actors there are out there, how high that ratio is in an environment that is about money. And I think that's the thing. It's money. So all the people who love money will be there, and the people who will, walk over dead bodies to get money. They're there. Like, and what's happening is that we're slowly but surely weeding them out. It's a shitcoiner purge in a way, and it takes a couple of decades before that plays out. But from what I can tell from the latest conferences, it's been it's getting way better. And the companies I interact with, the Orange Pill app, for instance, is like it's very much aligned with the ethos, and everyone's really in the bear market now, building and trying to stick with trying to be real and hardcore, and that's good to see.
Yeah,
that's fantastic.
Yeah, I think, I hope I didn't come off doom and gloom with what I said, but the point of what I was saying was that, you know, when the rats come into the home base, right? You know,
to the free cocaine in the lab.
Yeah, it has this effect, and in the end, it won't matter to Bitcoin. It does matter a lot to certain individuals or certain companies that get affected. And by the way, I spoke at Prague too, and I spoke at BitBlock Boom, and so. But I definitely agree with you that, you know, like that I don't want to be overly critical of Miami, because I think Miami, even though there's maybe, I mean, obviously there was some shitcoin stuff and there was some drama there and there was all those things. I think there is a place in the world for a really large gathering of people in the community to come together. But I really appreciate, I was just at BitBlock Boom, and of course I said I was in Prague. I'll be at Pacific Bitcoin, I'll be at Unconfiscatable. That's where I'll, you know, kind of my path for the rest of the year. Those kind of shows at a personal level, I get a lot more out of, because I feel like I interact with people that are more true to the cause, that are there for the right reasons. And as you said, you know, separating out some of these people that are in for the money. And I went on this little tirade about core, but I'm somewhat of a lone wolf, I think, in that I really have a problem on the whole with the entire sector of public mining companies, that I see that behavior for the most part across that entire sector, or group of companies. But I believe it's inherent to them being public. So my hypothesis would be that it is impossible to be a public mining company and act within the ethos, that you have diametrically opposed objectives. And if you look at the public mining companies, and like I said, I was part of taking a company public. It no matter what you say, it will change the way that you think and operate. Like it does. And it forces a high preference management style and behavior set within the company. And so I think it's something that I think it's very, very important that we watch closely what happens there, and hold these companies to the task when they stray too far from the ethos.
Yeah, this ties into like BIP 300 and what we talked about with Adam Back, Luke. If you remember that if BIP 300 is implemented, there will be like a 6-month or 3-month period for the users to check the miners so that they don't do something bad and start a cabal, whatever. So they're not in cahoots with one another. We have 3 months to figure it out, which is only parts of why that's a stupid idea. Why we'd want to shitcoin on Bitcoin. I never got that. But the thing is, isn't it beautiful? In the end, everything is good for Bitcoin, and isn't it beautiful? Like this brutal kind of fiat-y, by any means necessary kind of crony capitalism mindset is still good for Bitcoin in the end. Like that the system works, so that this, Gordon Gekko type greed in the end benefits everyone because it secures Bitcoin and produces blocks.
It does. I wish there was a different path, but I'm a realist as well, that they're going to be there. I can't stop them. They are, Bitcoin is open to everybody. If they choose to come in and do it this way, then so be it. The only caveat I'll throw to that, though, and this is the challenge that I kind of put to everybody out there, like listening, is if you go out and you buy stocks in these companies that are doing this, understand that you're supporting that behavior, that you're enabling that, and so, if like, for instance, in mining, if you were going to throw $10,000 to buy a public mining stock, maybe that $10,000 could be deployed either buying Bitcoin or buying your own mining equipment, operating it yourself. And you'd serve the greater good better that way than you would by buying that stock. But I can't stop you, so. This
makes me think of other events from 2017, mainly like when the users stopped the 2x hard fork from happening. So like there is a limit to what kind of shenanigans miner companies can do. Like still the users are in control, and I guess there's some sort of threshold there for bullshitty behavior.
Yeah, I think there is, but like I think the awareness. I like what you said about BIP 300. When I spoke at BitBlock Boom, my topic was on block space scarcity, and my feelings about how scarce it was going to be, what the implications of that were going to be. And at the end of the talk, which is available publicly to anybody that wanted to hear it, but at the end of the talk, one of the things that I predict is that at some point, it might be 3 years from now, it might be 10 years from now, we'll see an initiative come to try to reduce block time. So we've already had the block size wars. I predict a block time war, where what will happen is somebody will say, hey, the subsidy has come down to a point now where inflation is essentially zero, right? So we're approaching that point. So maybe 2 more halvings, we get to the point where inflation is now negligible. And we need to increase, well, this would be the belief. The belief is we need to increase the processing capacity of the network. And we've already lost the block size war. So another way to approach that is the block time war. So if we say, well, we can double the capacity of the network by shifting the block times from 10 minutes to 5 minutes. And so this is just a prediction, and it's one of those ones I hope is not true.
You think people are going to fall for that?
Well, I think they could, because I think you may have, because I think some of the actors who may promote it will not be just big miners, but also maybe like a BlackRock, a Fidelity, who are trying to reduce the fee rates. And so if you're out there and you're motivated to reduce the fee rates and increase the number of transactions that the base layer can do, it's honestly the only lever you have left. And so if you get past the point, like right now, it wouldn't work, right? It would be a mess roar, because you'd say, well, you've radically changed the inflation rate, right? But if the inflation rate is already down to zero, let's say in the year 2030, we've gone through really 3 more halvings by then, right? So we're down to a subsidy in the 0.78 range. I think it's 2032. They'd say, well, now we're introducing, so 0.78 times 210,000 blocks is only 140,000 Bitcoin or something like that, right? So doubling, making that come a little faster really won't change the inflation rate. So anyway, the reason I say it though is that I want to say it to people in a preemptive way, so that the community can the first time this idea comes up, and I'm sure it will, that we squish it. Like don't let it get momentum.
Okay, so here's my prediction when I hear that. First of all, I think the 10-minute intervals are way more, engraved in the collective consciousness of Bitcoiners than the 1 megabyte blocking size limit was, because that was sort of an arbitrary number that just happened way earlier when they didn't have any thought about the consequences of that way later down the line. So the one megabyte thing is more arbitrary than the 10 minutes, because it's sort of it has to do, the 10 minutes are very much connected with the difficulty adjustment, because difficulty adjustment, everyone knows 2 weeks. Not everyone knows 2016 blocks, but that's why it is 2 weeks. It's because of the 10 minutes. So the 10 minutes decide the 2 weeks, and the 2 weeks decide the 10 minutes. You can't have one without the other. So that's the thing. So I think this is, and if you add to that the history of the block size wars, and that we have the UASF and whatever played out there, if that's in the collective memory as well, and we will remind everyone why this is important, why Bitcoin is immutable. This is what immutability means, that the users are in control. And then BlackRock can advertise bullshit as much as they could. But still, at the end of the day, I think more and more people over time will converge to Bitcoin conservatism, if you will, rather than Bitcoin progressivism, because the risks of changing the protocol are, I could argue that we're already at the point where it's more dangerous to try to change it than to just keep it the way it is and do everything by soft fork, everything by layer 2. And even, the whole prediction that time space will be scarcer. I prefer to call it time space because it's cooler than block space. The time chain, space, time space. So time space will be a scarce asset, but we got Lightning, and we got Liquid, and we got all of this other stuff. And I think the biggest problem is mainly just people's imagination, because if money is just information, we can do all sorts of other ways of transacting, like keeping a tab on one another and whatnot, and like not using Bitcoin at all with people we trust, but just barter. You know what I mean? So and also I think another underestimated effect of people's lowered time preference and Bitcoiners being awesome to one another because we're incentivized to help one another is that we make fewer transactions per time unit because of this lowered time preference. So Bitcoiners don't like to spend that much. We like to save, and we would like to make a big payment every now and then, but we prefer not to make smaller payments. That's your list. And if we do, it's off chain anyway. So I think it's a problem that very likely will sort itself out in ways we might not be able to imagine yet. But
yeah, clearly I agree with you on the importance of the activities above the base layer, whether that's Lightning or Liquid or Fedimint or those sort of things are absolutely critical. I do want to be very clear that I am in no way trying to support this initiative. I'm just trying to be a potential, hey, watch out for this, because I can see the way that they think and that they're going to look at this and see it as a potential manipulation point. So, what's interesting about block space, like I said, I did a half-hour talk at BitBlockBoom about it, is that block space, I've come to this realization that block space is absolutely scarce, just like Bitcoin itself. So if you look at any period of time, the amount of block space in that time window is absolutely scarce.
That's why I love to call it time space, because it's not only scarce, but it's also abundant given enough time. But it's only absolutely scarce within those 10 minutes. When those 10 minutes have passed, you can't get into that block anymore. It's final. So if you want to engrave something on the time chain today, do it today, because you can't do it tomorrow. That's the scarcity of it.
But it's also, I 100% agree, Knut, but it's also absolutely scarce in any future window. So if I say in the next 30 days or the next year, it's also absolutely scarce.
Yeah, for 10 minutes.
Yeah, in 10-minute increments. Yeah. Although I'll tell you an interesting thing. I've done, one of the things I've done with my team is we weren't really have, I mean, there's some wonderful tools out there, but we wanted to do some analysis on the blockchain itself, and we weren't getting the data we wanted. So we went back to the Genesis block and we started stripping out a massive amount of data on every block that we've assembled. And we got some really cool stuff, but some simple stuff that some people might not be aware of. You may be aware of it, but the mean block time, all time, is about 9 minutes and 34 seconds. So, and in the last year, it's about 9:49. So we have a tendency to run just a little bit. And that makes sense because hash rate is growing. So the difficulty adjustment is backward looking, as you said, looking at the previous, it's actually 2015 looking back, but because of a coding error, I believe, but it looks back at the previous window and then it averages it. But in the meantime, more hash has been coming on typically, so it runs hot. But what's really fascinating is the median block time. So not the mean, but the median. And do you already guess at what that one is?
I guess it's way shorter because you have these really big intervals between blocks. I'm thinking of the 2 weeks between block 0 and 1 to begin with. When Satoshi refused to mine until another miner came online.
Another guy came on. Yeah.
So that of course alters the median number, but I would say it's like 8 minutes or something probably, because you sometimes have 2 hours between blocks.
Yeah. By the way, kudos to you. That's the best guess anybody has made thus far when I've asked that question. But it's actually 6 minutes 40 seconds is the median all time.
Yep. Makes sense.
And what's interesting is not only is it 6 minutes and 40 seconds all time, it's 6 minutes and 40 seconds within the last year too. Meaning it really hasn't changed. That, this is the cadence. And, I think part of it comes from what you've said. A block really can't be less than 0, other than the timestamps being off a little bit. But a block can't be less than 0 seconds from the previous block. But it can be technically an infinite amount of time till the next one.
Yeah, we don't know if we'll ever find a new Bitcoin block. And that's true always. You cannot ever know if the next block will be found. You have to rely on probabilistics.
Yeah, which is a wild concept. So far, you're doing pretty well.
This is also funny because, that old roulette thing that if you lose, you double the amount until a bet of 2 red, white or black. That's discarding the red, the 1 out of 100, but still.
Yeah.
The same thing is true for Bitcoin. The more hashing power there is, the more likely the less likely an infinite amount of time till next block becomes. You know what I mean? So
correct.
The more on spot it becomes, the more hashing power, the more powerful the algorithm, and the better it functions. That's what I'm trying to.
Absolutely, that's true. And, and by the way, these things, this will sound funny, but things like, you may say, well, Bob, why do you even care whether or not it's 9:49 or 10 minutes? But it's actually really important if you're a miner, because that's the difference in about 3 blocks per day. So when we look at our revenue stream as a miner, it may seem insignificant on the surface, but 9 minute and 49 second block times mean average versus 10 minutes is the difference in about 3 blocks per day. And so, that means that, number one, Bitcoin doesn't grow at 900 new Bitcoin in circulation on a daily basis. It's more like 920. And number two, if you're a miner, it means that revenue runs about 2% higher. So the fact that these block times run faster is a big benefit to the mining community. Now, the opposite would be true too. If we have a point in time where we see declining hash for a material part of time, then the blocks are going to be slower. By the way, that's a double whammy for us on the back half of the halving, because we will see that most likely for 3 or 4 difficulty adjustments. We'll see the cycle run slower. And so, it'll obviously depend on the price of Bitcoin at the time, how much hash rate falls. But it could be very material. We could see block time slip out to 12 or 13 minutes even. And so instead of 144 blocks per day, we might see 120 for a little while. And at the same time that the subsidy goes way down. And so, all of us in the mining business have to kind of be prepared and have a little bit in reserve for that possibility.
Yeah. Thinking of the time between blocks, I find it very funny that Bitcoin somehow knows when I'm using a Bitcoin ATM, and it always decides to not find the next block for an hour or two, whatever I'm trying to withdraw cash, And then the block after, it's like 2 minutes, and then there's another block.
Yeah, it is uncanny. It's uncanny how that happens. And obviously it's part of the random process. But one of the things that happens too is that for those of you who are less familiar with it, once a block gets mined, what the pools do to the miners, which right now the block templates, which means the transactions included in the block, are decided by the pool. And then once a block gets mined, what the pools do to the miners is they send them a blank template. So we start mining with a template that has no transactions in it. And in the meantime, pool is out there kind of assembling the next block, and it may take 5 or 10 seconds. And then they push the full template to us. But sometimes in that 5 or 10 second window,
you find a block with
somebody. Yeah. And so if you're ever curious as to why are there empty blocks? Block space is so precious. Why would there ever be an empty one? Well, that's why. Because
is the Coinbase transaction in there though?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes, of course. So miners find a block for themselves. Like, this is mine.
Yes, exactly. But otherwise, we waste 5 or 10 seconds. Like we don't want, as a community, we don't want that hash power sitting there doing nothing or working on the old, because the choices are work on nothing or work on the block that's already been found. Truthfully. So the best choice. Now, what I think is going to change is there's a lot of initiatives. Stratum V2 is one of them, but there are others out there that will move the template creation back to the miner. And by the way, if you're looking for something to support, don't get caught up in the BIP 300 initiatives. Go help miners and support miners who move template creation back to the individual miners. That is greatest move of decentralization.
Yes. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel and brush your fucking teeth. That's where I squeeze that in there.
Yes. In that order, please.
Exactly. Bribe the miners. Like, subscribe, click the damn bell notification button. Don't curse, and then brush your teeth. Yeah. FFS. Yeah.
So how are you enjoying this episode so far? Before we dive back in, first, a little bit about our sponsors. First up, Wasabi Wallet, the privacy by default, open source, non-custodial Bitcoin wallet with CoinJoin built in. It's the easy to use, comprehensive, affordable way to make your coins private. And the best part is they've been making huge improvements to the app. They're really focusing on the user experience, adding advanced features for power users. They just keep getting better. You send your coins to your Wasabi wallet and they get combined with loads of other coins using the Wabi-Sabi protocol, so they're private on the other end. Your tracks are covered, so you can work on expanding your freedom footprint without worrying about your privacy. So check out wasabiwallet.io and download Wasabi today. Next up, Orange Pill app, the Bitcoin social layer app for iOS and Android, where you can stack friends who stack sats. You can connect with your favorite Bitcoiners on the app, make local connections, and even connect with Bitcoiners around the world. And a big feature on Orange Pill app is Vents. You can see what's going on in your area and connect with Bitcoiners around you. I've been to multiple Orange Pill app events and they brought Bitcoiners together from all over. The best part is, you know it's high signal. There's no spam on Orange Pill app because everyone pays to be there. It's just $3 a month. So download Orange Pill app on Apple or Android and get connected to the Bitcoin social layer. Next up, our new sponsor, the Bitcoin Way. Their mission is to onboard, educate, and remove barriers to taking self-custody of your Bitcoin. They cover everything from cold wallets to nodes, no KYC Bitcoin purchases, inheritance planning, payments, and more. Whether you're new to Bitcoin or you're an experienced Bitcoiner looking to expand your freedom footprint, or you know someone who this sounds perfect for, the Bitcoin Way has something for you. They have a skilled team, well-versed in the Bitcoin space, and their goal is to make all the complexities of Bitcoin as straightforward as possible for everyone. And the best part is, you can get started with a free 30-minute call with their team. Go to thebitcoinway.com/contact for more info. All right, back to it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and brush your teeth. Maybe you can tell us a little more about that Stratum V2.
Yeah. So today what happens is, let's assume that a block just got mined. So we're ready to get a new one, right? When I didn't check this morning, but let's say there are 300,000 transactions in the mempool. And each mining pool today goes out and selects whichever group of those they can fit in a 4 million unit weight. Okay. Which roughly translated is something between 1.5 and 2 megabytes of data in physical data. And they cram in whatever they want. Now, you would think typically they're going to pick the ones that are the most expensive, but they don't have to. They can pick whatever they want. So for instance, when Binance mines pools, what you'll see is that their what's called the expected block is typically very different from the actual block. And why is that? Most likely because they're putting their own transactions in that block at very low fees and then stuffing whatever is left in there versus just it's not a first in, first out, and it's not a most expensive one. It's whatever they choose. But there are only about 15 active mining pools in the world. So if we look at the last 30-day windows, there's only about 15 pools that have mined a block. And so it's a pretty small group. And so meaning there are only 15 companies or 15 organizations making those decisions. And to me, that's a scary number. It's too few. It's too prone to censorship. And especially if you look at where the pools are, what you'll find is several of the pools are based in China. No disrespect to any of my Chinese friends, but I don't currently trust them to act in an appropriate manner. That there's too much likelihood that they are subject to censorship. Some of the other pools, like US-based pools, like Foundry and Luxor, which are two of the bigger non-Chinese ones, they're KYC pools. And so you really only have a couple places in the world where you can go get a non-KYC pool. And so there's a lot of thoughts about these being censorship points. So what Stratum V2 does, as it pertains to this particular issue, is it says, hey, if you are a miner and you are part of a given pool, you can construct whatever template you want. So meaning my company, Barefoot Mining, we could take our hashing resources and we could select our own transactions, and we would be part of the pool, and other people in the pool could go select their transactions. And if Barefoot Mining wins, we're essentially agreeing that we will still share our proceeds with the rest of the pool the same as we would have shared in another way.
But it's your set of transactions.
But we each selected our rights.
Yeah, that's a wonderful idea. We should push for that. Definitely.
So then theoretically, I mean, if we add up all the plebs, all the people with it means everybody can now be part of this, right? So whether or not you have one S9 in your garage, or you're a commercial miner with a couple megawatts, or your Riot with several hundred megawatts mining, we each can create our own template. And now the likelihood of any sort of censorship having a material impact on the industry essentially goes away.
All right. I think we need to clear, because some of the listeners here might think that miner centralization is a big issue when they hear this 15 companies thing. And I'd like to try my way of debunking that by saying, like, some of the narratives around mining are, in my opinion, wrong. Like, it's often said that the miners create the Bitcoins, which I think is the wrong way to look at it. Miners create blocks, and they're employed by node runners to mine blocks. So Bitcoin and node runners are either Bitcoin users themselves or employed by Bitcoin users. And Bitcoin users are not only Bitcoin users, but they use every other aspect of the economy too. So they use, bartering, fiat, assets, liabilities. Everything in an economy is connected. So in that sense, we truly all are Bitcoin, because even no coiners' ideas and trades affect what Bitcoiners do, which affects what the node runners do, which affects what the miners can and cannot do. So I think it's all connected. Like this idea that the miners are somehow the only ones securing the network is vastly misguided. Like they don't really understand how it works then. And of course, this Stratum V2 would add even more. What do you say? Like censorship resistant?
Yes.
I mean, it's censorship resistant enough as it is, because you can just wait for another block if your transaction is not in there. And if it's just a normal transaction, probably nothing will happen. And still, the mining pools, this is another important point. The mining pools cannot do whatever they want either, because they are pools. They are a collection of other miners that decide on the rules of the pool in the end. Like they can always choose to leave that pool and go into another pool, right? So they're not, there is free market competition everywhere there. That's the way I see it. Well, what do you say to that? What are your comments on that? Is there anything you disagree with?
No, I believe that, first of all, in the current conditions, there's nothing to worry about. There's the network as it sits today. There is no fear. There's no reason for it, for that fear. I would like to see more pools, though. I'll say that. There are only 15 pools in the world. And by the way, there are different. It's correct that you can hop from one to the other, but also understand that there are pros and cons of every pool. They don't all work the same way. They have different payout methodologies. Some are KYC pools. Some are based in other places. I always remember that at least in the current conditions, there's a risk to a miner with a pool, in that we are essentially, when the Coinbase comes out, right? When the Coinbase comes out, it goes to the pool first, and then it gets distributed to the miners. And so we are relying upon the integrity of that pool for our payout. And there are cases, by the way, Cleveland being the most recent one, where there was a failure, and they were using a payout method called FPPS, which I don't know if you want to go down in that rat hole, but it basically left some people where they wanted to withdraw their money from the pool, much like a typical user might want to move money off of an exchange. Well, we have to move the money off of the pool, and it wasn't there.
So was it a failure or a failure, quote unquote failure?
So there are two different ways that pools pay out, primarily. Okay, one is called PPLNS. By the way, Brains, for instance, works on this method. And it basically says, hey, every time we win a block, you're as miners, we're out doing work, and we're part of that pool. And maybe Brains loses and loses and loses, but we've contributed some work to those losing pools, so they keep track of it. And then they finally win one. And then they'll say, okay, we finally won one. Let's look at all the work you contributed during the period up to the point where we won one and then distribute the profits. Okay. That's one way to do it. The second way, which is the most common way now, is called FPPS. And in FPPS, what happens is the mining pool takes on a risk. They say, we're all working together on a given block, and you contributed a certain amount of work to that block. So even if we lose, we're going to pay you as if we won. Now, it's great for miners, by the way, from a consistency of payout, because we're not, we're getting paid every single block a certain amount. The problem is if they have a massive run of bad luck, because they have to have a reserve of Bitcoin to pay us, right? So if they have a massive run of bad luck and they run out of Bitcoin before they win one, then you're shit out of luck, right?
Then they will have to sell their shares.
Yes.
Their shares. Yeah. That's what will happen. And after that, something even worse. I wouldn't even want to think about it.
So
yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. So I know we're kind of in the bowels of mining, but the reason I say that is that it is a true statement that you made, that you can move from pool to pool. But understand two things. One is they're not all the same. And number two, those that require KYC, that has become a really obnoxious process. So it's true that you can just go into the miner and you can point it to a new pool. But if you want to point it to a KYC pool, they won't accept you until you've gone through the KYC process. So there are certain, in the end, everything you said is true. There's a little bit of nuance to it.
So why are people KYC mining at all? I mean, to me, that sounds weird, because the only reason I can think of for myself to mine is first of all, the electricity price needs to be 5 cents or less or something like that, right? For it to be profitable at all.
Which
maybe a bit.
It depends on your machine, but yeah.
Yeah. Say I get the S9 for free. It would still have to be less than 10 cents or something.
Oh, an S9, yeah, you're probably four, yes, yeah.
All right. So the thing is, to my knowledge, that's the word. It's better to just buy the Bitcoin or accept Bitcoin for your goods and services than to try and mine them. So the only reason that I would personally run a miner is to get KYC free Bitcoin. That's the whole point, because KYC free Bitcoin are very valuable. And some exchanges that you might have bought your Bitcoin off far back in the past may be KYC, then they may flag coin joins and whatnot. And if you don't know exactly what you're doing, that's a tricky thing to pull off for most people. So mining is an easy way to get KYC free Bitcoins, relatively easy.
As at the individual level, but I call those rabbits. So all the individuals out there that are mining, yes, you should use a non-KYC pool, and you should mine that way. If you're a commercial miner like me, at least with my commercial operation, I mean, we kind of have to KYC anyway. It doesn't really matter, because it's our business, right? We're reporting the income. It's fairly obvious what we're doing. That said, I'm going to put the pools available today into 3 buckets. Okay. The first bucket are the ones in China. So you have Poolin, S2 Pool, and Pool, maybe as the big ones, right? And I'm trying to remember. I think a couple of those are KYC, but they're also in China. And so there's a certain risk there. And Poolin being the one that actually failed for a significant period of time because they ran out of money. So there's a history there to be leery of. The second group are North American-based pools Foundry and Luxor being the two big ones, but they're full KYC pools. They're well-run companies. The pools run well. They use this FPPS method that I talked about, so they pay very consistently. But they're KYC. Then the non-KYCs, I'd say the two primary places you have to go to do kind of non-KYC stuff would be Brains and NiceHash. Each good companies. I'll say even though they don't require KYC. We do at Barefoot Mining. We use both of those. By the way, we use both of those in our operations. We still report all our income because of what we do, but they're very, very good pools. But they're honestly like the only two choices I can think of, legitimate choices that I can think of today that give you that option. So if you're an individual miner out there running an S9, like you said, Knut, I would pick one of those two and use them because, I mean, that's the choice set, right? So there's really nothing else for people to consider.
Yeah, someone showed me a service in Riga where you could just pay some sats to Brains via some other service, and they would mine for you. So you could basically give them KYC Bitcoins and get non-KYC Bitcoins back. So it's pretty neat. Given that you actually got them back because you need to find a block in order to, since it's mining, it's unlikely that their business model is backwards. So you probably lose more money than you make, but still it's KYC free.
Yeah, there was a lot of speculation earlier this week. Some of you may have seen that there was a very unusual block that was mined where there were like the 20 Bitcoin fees, and
$500,000 in fees. Yeah.
And I think it was F2 pool, by the way. So it was one of the Chinese pools that mined it.
Yeah, so they probably paid themselves, right?
Yeah, so it's that was my speculation. So I can only guess, right? My speculation is something not unlike you just described, where somebody wanted to clean something up, and create virgin Bitcoin, right? I mean, that's what they wanted, was some virgin Bitcoin, and that's a great way to do it.
This is also like we call these things fees and subsidies and rewards and transactions and inputs and outputs. But at the end of the day, it's just numbers. It's just a string of ones and zeros. Who doesn't care? Who can't care what we call them? So you can. So in the end, it's just your imagination that sets the limits for what Bitcoin can actually be used for. So and that's just that part of the rabbit hole, I think, is vastly unexplored. It's like another thing I've been talking about is these steel plates being sort of the standard for seed phrases now. Mm-hmm. And like that's also, I don't think that will last forever. I think that's a thing now. But the only thing that stops you from storing your Bitcoins in any other way is your imagination. It's just that it has become an industry standard because they're fireproof and bulletproof and whatnot. But still, it's just information. It doesn't have to be a seed phrase. It can be ones and zeros. It can be a JPEG. It can be a hexadecimal number. It can be whatever. And you can hide them in a poem. You can hide them in underpants. My point is that the only thing that sets the limits is your imagination. And this goes for everything in Bitcoin. Like how you use Bitcoin is also only limited by your imagination. I mean, I would say that in a philosophical sense, we're using Bitcoin right now. We're not sending anything, but we're all Bitcoin proponents, and we're doing a Bitcoin show, and we get something out of it, of interviewing you. You hopefully get something out of talking to us. And in a meta sense, we are using Bitcoin right now, and we're doing a transaction. It's just that it's very, very meta. But still, it's all in our heads. Since Bitcoin is so connected to just our brains, it's all about keeping secrets. And if you've seen my latest, maybe you even saw it in Prague. I had to talk about how we are our Bitcoins, because like the miner, you're the miner. Your machines are not the miners. You are the miner, because you're the guy that decided to buy them, plug them in, and run the software. And me and my node, and Luke and his node, we are the nodes, not the Raspberry Pi. And also, just what is owning a Bitcoin? You can't own a Bitcoin. All you can do is remember a secret. That's all it is. And the only thing, so it's not true ownership. It's just hoping that no other person has access to the secret that you know. So that's all it is. So which should make it like impossible to legally do anything to Bitcoin in a proper country. Unfortunately, there are no proper countries, so they all have flawed legal systems, and we can't do whatever we want with our information in our heads. And free speech is a facade everywhere, because the big thing that Bitcoin did to me was make me realize that money is only information. It's nothing but information. And it's how we use that information. And that's important. And only our imaginations set the limits to how we can do that. We've been told our entire lives that money is a noun when it's really just an adjective. Everything has a moneyness to it. And it's better or worse as a medium of exchange, but anything can be a medium of exchange. Everything is money. Like, it's just information.
Yeah, no, I'm really just supporting what you've pontificated there so well. It's and I think that's part of the thing. You know, I have a technical background. I have a background in economics, and I think that one of the hard things there are so many people in the world who perceive themselves as being financially literate or literate in business or literate in economies. And that's their biggest obstacle, is that they're the hardest people for me to, like we talked about orange pill apps. Well, they're the hardest people to orange pill are those people that have that perception of
the know-it-alls.
The know-it-alls. They're the worst ones. I mean, I used to try so hard, and now I can see it very quickly. And I just say, well, I'm going to move on to the next person and put my energy into somebody that is receptive, because they're not there. There's nothing I can do to push them over the edge. And, are you familiar with the Dunning-Kruger curve?
Yeah. I love it.
Yeah. And there's people that are stuck on that first.
John Cleese, one of my heroes, John Cleese is very good. He has a very eloquent description of what the Dunning-Kruger effect is. And I think he actually knew the two psychologists behind this, the Dunning and Kruger, or at least one of them, and how it explains not only Hollywood, but the rest of the world as well.
Well, yeah, it certainly typifies so many people that I know all of us run into as we try this, and maybe to a certain degree, me. I don't think I ever had quite the arrogance that some of the people have, but I've always had a quest for knowledge. I think from young boy, I've continually read and explored and wanted to learn new things. And, Bitcoin doesn't disappoint. I mean, that's the beauty of it is, I think you've been longer than I have, but, 6 years into this journey, and even with my technical background and even with my background in economics, I'm learning on a daily basis. And that's a marvelous thing. My wife, I turn 60 next year.
Congratulations.
Yeah, well, I guess I'm still here, right? But one of the things my wife has said to me that I think it's really important to me at a personal level. She said, she knew me back in the personal computer days, right? And I knew I was working, especially as time went by, I knew I was working on something that was changing the world. That, personal computer is really an extension of information too, right?
Exactly. It's a fancy abacus. That's all it is. It's just an abacus. Just a really, really fast one and a really, really good one. But at the end of the day, it's just what?
It's still ones and zeros, right? At the end of the day. And, the realization of that, hey, I was part of that revolution from the very beginning, and I was very proud of it, and I spent 20 years doing it. And when it ended, like, one of the things I'll say, I'm not a celebrity, I never was, but I was part of that revolution at a core level, and I woke up every day with this enthusiasm because I knew I was doing something like really important that would leave a mark on the earth.
I know the feeling.
Yeah. Well, and then it ended. And I don't want to say I was depressed, but I was searching for something, because when it ended, it wasn't there anymore. And I think I know to a certain degree what it might feel like if like people who are famous, maybe they were an athlete or an entertainer, and then they get on the backside of that and it's not there anymore. I think I know what that feels like. Like you kind of don't know what your purpose is and what your role is. And if you think your best days are behind you, that's a really bad thought. Right?
Yeah, it's a shitty feeling.
It's a shitty feeling. And I had it. And so I was slugging through life. I was still trying to do things, but nothing I was working on had that same importance until Bitcoin. And so, my wife, what she'll say is like my aura changed, my enthusiasm for life, like all those sort of things, like reinvigorated me when I found Bitcoin, because I go, oh, now I have purpose. And what's beautiful is, I don't know whether I have 1 year left or 30 years left, but I know what my purpose is, at least professionally, over that entire period. And that gives me a lot of comfort on a daily basis, to know I have that inspiration ready for me.
That's beautiful. So there are two more things I wanted to ask you about. And one of them is a rabbit hole in itself. Speaking of orange pilling, like how come you invested in Orange Pill app, and what made you make that decision? Because you might know that I'm an advisor for Orange Pill app.
Yes.
So disclaimer, we're also sponsored by Orange Pill app. So there are the disclaimers, but
yeah. And I am an investor, as you've said. So, well, so first is I created a Bitcoin fund. It's mainly for family and friends. Some of you may have the same thing, where people came to me over the years like, Bob, can you help me get invested in Bitcoin? And how do I do this? And how do I do that? And I just said, well, let me just create a fund. And so I'll manage these investments for people. So that was one part of it. But more fundamentally, I live at the base layer. That's where I spend my day. And I'm very passionate about it. I view it as something sacred that I have to protect. But I also know that for Bitcoin to flourish, things have to happen outside of the base layer, right? Like we talked about Lightning and Liquid and Fedimint and like those sort of things. But we also need things at even what I would consider a higher layer, like the social layer. And I saw what was happening with Orange Pill app to connect the community. And I think in a lot of ways, that is such an important piece of Bitcoin flourishing. And I thought that the team was doing a pretty good job with the app. It was nice to be able to invest in something that was already there and working and building a community as opposed to just a concept. But it was doing something that I thought was critical to the ecosystem and the community flourishing.
Yeah, cool. That sounds like the same reasons that I decided to say yes to them and be on the advisory board, because I saw the potential in it. And when Matteo explained it to me, I was sold on the idea. It felt like something we've been missing. And I would say that it's layer 0 though, and not a layer above. It's a layer below.
Okay.
Like without people, maybe not Orange Pill app itself, but the people in Bitcoin, they're the absolute most crucial thing. They're more, since we are
the
Bitcoins. Yeah. So the computers they're the abacuses. And we are the foundation, the layer 0 running the layer 1 and the layer 2s and whatnot.
I'll buy that.
That's nitpicky, I know. And
no, it's not. I think those are important things. So I enjoy conversations like this because I think that for all of us, we have to kind of evolve and how we look at the ecosystem and feel about it. And I think that that's a really sage observation that, at the end of the day, it is the people that.
Yeah. It's just an agreement on a fixed set of rules.
Yeah. Bob, what do you hope comes out of Orange Pill app? What do you hope it leads to?
Well, I one of the things I love about the Orange Pill app is that it's not free. That, there is a cost of entry because, we live in, whether it's the Twitter world or the Reddit world or whatever your community of choice is. And it's so easy for anonymous people to come in for free and cause clutter and confusion. Even like Nostr, it has some potential. I don't wish ill upon it, but it's subject to the same problem. And so I think for us to have a safe place that offers value, and that I know if somebody, like, I respond to everybody. So if you're on Orange Pill app and you DM me, I'm going to respond to you because I know you're my tribe, right?
Same here. Don't tell anyone, but we're almost 90 minutes into the show, so it's safe to say it here because it's only high signal people left.
Yeah, if you're here, you're still my tribe. So, and so, because I want to connect to those people. It's hard to find genuine friends and genuine people on this world. And I've had very few interactions with Bitcoiners all over the world that have been negative. And so, hence what I just said. Like, I'm happy to meet anybody that wants to meet me.
Good to hear. A couple of other points. I'm curious to how this is a completely different subject. I'm just curious how you found my works back in 2017, because I was relatively unknown by then, or whenever you found them.
I believe that it was that you had, I don't remember what it was, but I think I saw something on Twitter that showed me that you were thinking on a different plane than most people. Yeah, I found Knut's book, and I just said, this is a dude that's thinking differently, and I want to get in his head. And so, obviously, it's a pleasure to meet you and get to know you a little bit more even now today. But especially being inside your book. In fact, I did, because we were doing this show, I went back and So, I went and when I read, I take a lot of notes, and so if my kids someday, if they ever want to read my books, I do that for two reasons. One, I take copious notes in the book itself, as I'm reading. And, it helps me because I'll go back and I'll read and I can find the things that were really pertinent to me. And at least for my children someday, I hope that if they're ever interested, they can know what Dad was thinking, right? See where my head was. But
yeah, that's part of the reason that I write books,
Yeah, well, that's I have not written a book, but I tried to write a lot myself. I've done several articles for Bitcoin Magazine and my blog, and I think I wish because I've been through this sort of industry. Like if I could go back to 1985 or 1986, and I could have all my notes and my thoughts about the early days of the personal computer, I would treasure those. And And I don't have them. I didn't do that back then. I didn't think it was. I don't know. I guess I don't even know why.
If you did that, Steve Jobs and Bill Gates would have been nobodies. You'd leapfrog them all.
Actually, I knew both of them. Actually, Steve's gone, but I knew Gates, and he's not a nice man, but he's just in case you wondered.
He is not a nice man, or he is a nice man?
No, he's not.
All right. Well, there are tells. Yeah, I don't know him, so I shouldn't talk down on people I don't know. That's bad behavior. I'm thinking all those building computer days. I remember, like in the mid '90s, when stationary computers were the thing, and in order to get a good gaming computer, which there weren't any around, you had to build your own, and you had to like buy some more memory and buy some more stuff for it, more fans and stuff, and just add them yourself. A lot of do-it-yourself stuff, which was way harder back then because there weren't, now if you add memory to a PC, there's a specific slot that is, and it's easy to do. It wasn't back then, but it was fun because it's the ultimate, like raking something and trying to put it together again. It's wonderful.
Well, it's very, one of the things I speak on sometimes is, the analogies between the personal computer era and the Bitcoin era. And that a lot of times the Bitcoiners have a tendency to look at the internet adoption and the Bitcoin adoption, and they kind of say, oh, we're here relative to the internet. And, maybe because of my history, probably because of my history, I look at it a little differently. I look at the personal computer as really the enabler of the internet. And, without the personal computer, there is no internet. It didn't have there had to be the users there and the hardware there to make that happen. Computer. But the early days of the personal computer, as you said, Knut, they were difficult. And so if you've run them, if you're a miner or you run a node or you do those things and there's idiosyncrasies and all kinds of difficult things, you're just in that same space as the personal computer back in the late 80s to the mid-90s. And all that'll work itself out. It won't be long till it's very, very easy. All those usability things will be a thing of the past, and you won't even remember how difficult it was. And hopefully the same with custody too. That all those usability things will.
I think there will always be trade-offs, but still, it will be easier. I mean, this reminds me of my Commodore 64 and how I had to adjust the cassette player's sensitivity, the head. And then the upgrade to that was that it came with a knob, so you didn't have to use a screwdriver anymore. So there was an actual cassette deck for a Commodore 64 with a knob instead of, just the screw for the screwdriver. Fantastic stuff. I have very fond memories of that. My first, the first programs I made on the Commodore 64 in BASIC. And then the other memory I have from like a leap in computing is when the internet started around 95 or 96. As far as I can recall, I sort of saw what was coming, and like, holy shit, this is unstoppable, and this is going to change everything. Like I had that in my head, and I was trying to talk to people about it, but they, as usual, people go about their day and don't think about things like that. So I was close to, devoting my life to doing something with the internet or on the internet or something internet related. But then I failed my electronics engineering studies and decided to go and be a sea captain like my father instead, which was a dumb choice. But on the other hand, if I hadn't, I might not have been here and my perspectives might have been completely different. So right now, I'm pretty happy that I have a different background than everyone else in the space, because I think people underestimate their uniqueness in a sense, and the older you get, the more unique you get.
I think that's like in my history, we all have these life vectors, and there's a whole long story I'll tell you over a drink someday. But when I got out of college, I had a technical degree, computer engineering, and I had 2 job offers. One was with the National Security Agency to be a spy, and the second was to go design personal computers for Zenith. And obviously, I chose the design personal computer path. But clearly, if I had taken the other job, I would have been on a pretty different life vector. And I was very happy that I took that choice.
Spy seems stressful and not necessarily productive.
Yeah. But, it had this, I have to admit, like I was 21 years old, and it had this allure. Like they offered me a lot of money.
From the movies.
I would have gone to, they were going to put me in a 2-year doctoral program to get my doctorate in mathematics, specifically in cryptography, and for obvious reasons. And then they would have assigned me to some embassy somewhere around the world, and I would have masked as a embassy worker, right, and done whatever they told me to do, I guess, on the other side of that. And in the end, I didn't take the job, obviously, but I always wonder, much like maybe you would wonder too, like what would have happened if I had gone this way or that way. Pretty sure I made the right choice.
Have you seen The Man from U.N.C.L.E.? That old television series.
Yeah.
There's a Bob's Your Uncle joke here to be made, but I can't find it.
The show is also sponsored by Xelox. That's XELLOX. They've developed the excellent Yokis seed plate kit, the solution against everything life throws at you, including fire, water, corrosion, and pests. The Yokis package includes 3 stainless steel plates and a pen-sized electric engraver so you can write your seed on metal just like writing on paper. And they have big plans. They're developing a next-gen hardware wallet too, but for now, you can order the Yokis to safeguard your keys in a safe and convenient way. Check out Xelox at xelox.io. That's XELLOX.io. And finally, we're also sponsored by BitcoinBook.shop, your source for Bitcoin books in over a dozen languages, including all of Knut's books. Their mission is to translate great Bitcoin and freedom-oriented books into as many languages as possible, while also publishing original titles to get even more knowledge out there. Use code FOOTPRINT for 10% off your purchases at BitcoinBook.shop.
Anyway, so where were we? Speaking about that drink, which conferences are you going to this year? Is there any chance we'll see you?
Will see me at Pacific Bitcoin and at Unconfiscatable. Those will be the next 2. You'll be at either of those?
Not coming to those. Unfortunately, we're sort of stuck in Europe here this fall, mostly voluntary. I went to 13 conferences the past year, so I'm pretty tired of being a ping pong ball. And but the big one is the Bitcoin Atlantis in Madeira in March. You heard about that one?
I did. I'm intrigued by it. I haven't spoken to anybody from there, but it looks quite appealing. So yeah, you obviously will be there?
Yeah, I'm sort of organizing it. I'm a part of the organization that organizes it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I'm working with Andre, and he's shown me some insider stuff there, and it looks absolutely fantastic. With the president has given us a stadium, a football stadium. Imagine that, to host a Bitcoin conference in.
Wow.
And all the big names are coming, and Madeira itself. I was Madeira pilled way before I was orange pilled, and Madeira is just absolutely stunning. So use code Knut for 10% off of the tickets for Bitcoin Atlantis, and go and check that out. And we'll have a swell time there. And I'll be on the island some weeks before, I think, and maybe a week after or something, because why the hell not? It's a literal paradise. And there'll be Bitcoiners everywhere. Can't imagine a better time and place to be.
It looks wonderful. It looks wonderful. So yeah, I'll seriously have to look at that one. Well, it is a highly appealing place. I haven't been there. And I know my wife and I have talked about that before. I'm very blessed to have a wife who's completely orange filled and a Bitcoin or two, and that really helps.
Yeah.
But as you said, it is hard because you could spend your life going to Bitcoin conferences, and so you have to pick the right ones and the ones that you're going to have the most impact on. Because I think this will be 6 or 7 this year for me. And, like I said, I'm trying to run a company at the same time. So, I can only afford so much.
Yeah. I know that feeling, trying to juggle life. All right. Luke, do you have any further questions for Bob or
any final thoughts?
Well, I'll just say that, you'll hear, I think we're at a point right now where we're seeing a lot of chatter. You mentioned the BIP 300 thing earlier. We had the ordinals stuff earlier.
Noise.
No. Yeah. Just, don't get caught up in it. Just stay online. We're fine. You're fine. Bitcoin's fine. Just stay the course. And we'll, we're all going to be okay.
Great. Well, it was a fantastic conversation, Bob. Nice to have you here and nice to see you again. And I hope we can catch up at some conference. And the next time we're at the same conference, we shouldn't miss one another.
Absolutely. I will make sure.
And where can our listeners and viewers find you and follow what you're up to?
Yeah. For our company, if you're a potential investor, we do bring in individual investors into mining projects. So every time we bring up a new mining site, we typically create a unique company operated by Barefoot Mining, and we bring in investors. So if anybody has that interest, just go to barefootmining.com and fill out the investor form. And then on Twitter, I'm boomer_BTC.
Wonderful. All right. This has been the Freedom Footprint Show. Like and subscribe and brush your teeth. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
So what did you think of that episode with Bob? I learned a lot about how mining really works, and I'm glad we have someone like Bob in the space to advocate for the Bitcoin ethos in the industry. What was your favorite moment? Let us know. You can send us a boostergram on Fountain, leave us a comment on YouTube, or get in touch on Nostr or Twitter. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to like the episode and subscribe to the channel. Our show sponsors are Wasabi Wallet, Orange Pill app, The Bitcoin Way, Zellox, and bitcoinbook.shop. Check out their details in the description. That's all for now. See you next time, and thanks for listening.